Every day, more than 200,000 people travel under the Hudson River through two tunnels built in 1910. These narrow tubes are the single busiest rail crossing in North America, and they have no backup. If just one goes out of service, train capacity collapses overnight, stranding commuters from Washington to Boston. Studies say it could cost the US economy over $100 million a day in lost productivity. That's why a $16 billion rescue is now underway. Two new modern tubes are being built beneath the river. But there's a catch. The ground below isn't rock. It behaves almost like liquid. So how do you dig a new tunnel without collapse while the most important rail line in America stays live? And can they finish before the system finally runs out of time? On paper, this sounds like a New York problem. There are two old tunnels located beneath a river. Fix them and move on. But it's not that simple. Look at this map. The Northeast Corridor is a 457-mile economic artery running from DC to Boston, supporting roughly 20% of US economic output. And sitting right in the middle of that artery are these two tunnels, which are the bottleneck. One track in, one track out. No backup. It's a single point of failure for the entire system. And right now, it's failing. 2 out of every 3 days there are delays. A 35-minute commute turns into 50. And when things go wrong, hundreds of trains are delayed or cancelled, stranding thousands of people. In total, about $1.2 trillion in economic output relies on infrastructure that has been operating since 1910. And that's what turns this from a regional problem into a national one. Lines running south to Miami, west to Chicago, and down to New Orleans all funnel through here. If the Hudson tunnels shut down, trains stop moving across half the country. There is literally no other route. That's why $12 billion in federal funding has finally been committed, one of the largest federal transit investments in modern US history. So how did the busiest rail line in North America end up depending on century-old tunnels? In effect, the entire national rail network narrows to just 2 tracks beneath one river. The North River tunnels weren't always a problem. When the Pennsylvania Railroad completed them in 1910, they were engineering marvels. For over a century, they did what they were designed to do before Hurricane Sandy hit in 2012. 13 million gallons of salt water flooded both tubes. While engineers managed to pump the water out, the salt stayed behind, which is like an invisible cancer. Chloride embedded in the walls eats away at the concrete and steel every day. The tunnels are literally dissolving from the inside out. So why not shut them down and fix them? Because the region can't function without them. It's a classic catch-22. You can't fix the tunnels without shutting them down, and you can't shut them down without crippling the economy. The only option is to build something new first. This isn't the first attempt. A previous project called ARC was started in the 2000s, only to be killed by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie in 2010. Then the replacement plan got stuck in political limbo under the Trump administration. By the time it was finally approved in 2021, we had lost a decade of progress and $16 billion. So after all the delays and ballooning costs, what's the plan? The plan is to build 2 new tubes under the Hudson while maintaining current service. Once these open in 2035, traffic will shift to the new tubes so the old ones can be fully rehabilitated. By 2038, the region will have 4 operational tubes, doubling capacity. Sounds straightforward, right? Except the route is anything but simple. The route starts in North Bergen, New Jersey, at the base of the Palisades. Tunnel boring machines must carve through 1 mile of solid rock before descending 275 feet deep to travel 2.5 miles under the Hudson River. On the Manhattan side, they rise into a pre-built concrete box before connecting to Penn Station. Each tunnel is wide enough to carry modern rail systems, emergency walkways, and ventilation, with an internal diameter of about 25 feet. Every 750 feet, cross passages connect the 2 tunnels for emergency evacuation. There are modern fireproof doors, ventilation systems designed against flooding, and electrical infrastructure built to withstand another major storm. To pull off a project this complex, engineers have broken it down into 6 phases. Let's have a look. Phase 1 is site preparation, which is largely complete. In North Bergen, the Tunnel Avenue overpass is finished. In Manhattan, crews have been working since 2023 on the Hudson Yards tunnel box. Phase 2 tackles the biggest geological risk, chocolate pudding riverbed. To prevent machines from sinking, engineers are using deep soil mixing. For that, engineers are building a 600-foot temporary dam in the river to inject a mix of cement and water directly into the riverbed. This will create a reinforced block of earth. It's a race against nature because the work pauses annually for the Atlantic sturgeon migration, so stabilization won't finish until March 2027. While the river hardens, Phase 3 begins. 2 custom-built tunnel boring machines, each weighing 1,680 tons and stretching 500 feet, are arriving. Components shipped to New Jersey this month for assembly, but they can't start the main dig until the riverbed is stabilized. By spring 2026, the first cut-ahead will hit the dirt, with the second following in the summer. This is the grind phase. For the next 2 years, these machines will chew through a mile of hard rock at the Palisades before switching to pressurized shield tunneling for the soft riverbed. They will advance about 30 feet a day, excavating 1,250 cubic yards of rock while installing precast concrete walls between them. Once the digging wraps up in late 2027, Phase 5 begins. This is the integration phase, which is like performing open-heart surgery on a running patient. Engineers have to thread new tracks through a maze of Manhattan subways and foundations to connect with Penn Station, all while the old tunnels next door are still running 24 trains per hour. By October 2029, the tunnel structure will be fully cleared and connected. Finally, Phase 6 brings the system to life. From 2030 to 2035, crews will install fireproof doors, massive ventilation fans, and flood-hardened power systems. If all goes to plan, the first passenger train will glide through in 2035, and a 20-year journey will be ended. But a project so massive couldn't come without the hard parts left. That's true here. This project is facing a storm of challenges. First, we lost a decade to politics. Between the cancellation of the ARC tunnel in 2010 and the funding blocks under the Trump administration, the project was treated as a political football. By the time it was revived in 2021, the price had skyrocketed. Today, the tunnel alone cost $16 billion. If you include the rest of the Gateway program, it hits $30 billion. It took a record-breaking $6.88 billion grant from the Federal Transit Administration just to get things moving. But securing the money was the easy part compared to engineering. This is urban tunneling in one of the densest environments in America. On the Manhattan side, the risk of hitting existing infrastructure is constant, and they have to do it without stopping the trains. Penn Station operates 24/7, meaning the construction team is working inches away from live tracks. Then there is the river itself. As we mentioned, the ground stabilization is complex, but environmental regulations make it even harder. The Hudson River is home to Atlantic sturgeon, and strict rules prevent construction work during their migration season. This restricts the team to narrow windows of time, adding pressure to an already tight schedule. On top of the physical challenge, there is the coordination nightmare. This project involves 2 state governments: Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, the Port Authority, and multiple federal agencies. Getting them all to agree on labor contracts, safety standards, and funding splits has been described by insiders as herding cats. And finally, there is the criticism. At roughly $6.6 billion per mile, this is one of the most expensive rail projects in the world. Critics point out that comparable tunnels in Europe and Asia often cost 30 to 50% less. But supporters argue that building in New York, with its high labor costs, strict regulations, and density, is simply in a league of its own. So what does $16 billion buy you? For the daily commuter, it buys sanity. For commuters, this means the difference between a predictable 35-minute trip and an hour-long delay with no warning. If a track breaks or a storm hits, trains can just switch lines. It's also a massive economic engine, creating 95,000 jobs and using American-made materials nationwide. At the peak of construction, that is $80 million per month in wages and materials flowing into the economy. And thanks to strict Buy America laws, the steel and machinery are being manufactured across the entire US. However, there is one major catch that often gets overlooked. While the tunnels fix the crossing, they still feed into Penn Station's outdated 1910 layout. It's like building a massive highway that dumps everyone into a tiny driveway. Until the station itself is expanded, which is a separate unfunded battle, we won't see way more trains, just much more reliable ones. So, where does this leave us? We're looking at a 12-year marathon. Heavy tunneling runs through 2027, the new tunnels are open in 2035, and by 2038, all 4 tubes are fully operational. But this isn't just about digging a hole. This tunnel is the centerpiece of a much bigger puzzle. It's happening alongside the new Portal North Bridge and the replacement of the Sawtooth bridges. Basically, we're performing a heart transplant on the entire northeast region while it's still running. In the end, this project is a massive test. We're racing a 9-year construction timeline against century-old concrete that is degrading a little more every day. The money is committed, the machines are here, we've passed the point of no return. For 116 years, 2 narrow tubes have carried the weight of the American economy. Now, the race is finally on. Because the question was never whether America can afford to build this tunnel, it's whether it can afford not to. So now you tell us, do you think the US can build redundancy fast enough before a single failure shuts the system down? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe to MegaBuilds and turn on the bell icon. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.